Hey there. In this video, I'll be going over a project for my cloud computing course, in which we'll be building a serverless AI data engineering pipeline. And this is basically the diagram which I'll walk through right now. We use this is all at AWS, so we're using AWS CloudWatch to schedule a job every 1 minute. And so what that's going to do is that's going to call basically our producer Lambda function, which is going to read from a table in DynamoDB. In this case, that table can be anything, but we're going to use company names. Then from that table, it's going to put those names into SQS, which is another AWS service, in the form of messages. And so every time those names are put in as a message, it's going to trigger our next Lambda function, which is a consumer Lambda. And what the consumer Lambda does is it consumes that message and then performs some type of analysis. In this case, this diagram is sentiment analysis, and I also added on entity recognition, both of which are just API calls to another AWS service called Comprehend. Then once all that analysis is performed and the output is created, it's then going to put those files into our specified S3 bucket. So now I'll walk through kind of how that's all done within the console. Starting with the Comprehend API, here's the documentation is really well created. There's a lot of different functions that you can do. Detecting sentiment is one that we'll be doing, and the other that I added on is detecting named entities. So here you can say for a given text, here we have the date as well, today, as well as let's say it's the word Seattle. And it's just going to recognize both of those, today as a date entity and Seattle as a location. For our case, like I mentioned, the table is going to contain company names, which I'll show here. So here our table is called Fang. We just have Facebook, Apple, Google, Netflix, and we also threw in WeWork there. And so really what it's going to do is basically trigger this. It's going to search through Wikipedia, pull the Wikipedia text, and then through that Wikipedia text identify the named entities in that first sentence. And so most of these, the main entity we expect to recognize is the organization being the name of the company. So going to the code itself, we're using it in Cloud9, and we have a couple Lambda functions. So the first I mentioned is the producer. So here is basically just scanning the table from the DynamoDB. It's sending that message to SQS, and then it's just logging it at every point. Once that's done and basically that's created, it's going to SQS is going to trigger our consumer Lambda function, which is a little bit more complicated, but that's where it pulls in from Wikipedia. It basically gets the information, it runs the call to whether it's the sentiment here or the extract entities here. And you can modify this in any way. It's going to get those outputs into a data frame, in this case using a pandas data frame, and write that to an S3 bucket. And so that's all essentially that this is doing, slightly modified from the original code that our instructor provided. Here we have the SQS, you can see kind of in real time still running. There's messages that are being prompted every minute, and then the messages are then in flight in order to be going to the consumer Lambda. And so kind of overall to see this is the S3 bucket where it's all being populated. And so these are the different messages that are being shown, and ultimately we can download this with the sentiment as well as the named entity recognition. So I've downloaded this one here, and I'll just shift over to it in the numbers in Apple. And so here we have the names of the different companies, the Wikipedia snippet that's being analyzed. And so for here we have Netflix, Facebook, and Google as really the main entities that are here. The sentiment for all this is neutral as we would expect. And then with the score, we get the probability or its confidence, the type, which is in this case, again, organization, the text, which character that it was in the sentence, as well as the end character. And so from some of these, we're also recognizing the word American as other. But this is just basically kind of a simple way to use some AWS functions in Comprehend and loop them in with Lambda functions to create a serverless pipeline.